July 2020. The South China Sea, 0400 hours. The USS Nimitz carrier strike group crosses into disputed waters. 11 warships, 7,500 personnel, 90 aircraft. On the carrier's bridge, radar operators watch their screens, and what they see makes their blood run cold. 16 contacts. Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy warships, forming a cordon, not retreating, not maneuvering defensively, waiting. The Chinese fleet includes Type 055 destroyers, their most advanced surface combatants, submarines lurking below, anti-ship missiles locked on target from the mainland, 200 miles away. This isn't a patrol, it's a trap. For the next 72 hours, two nuclear-armed superpowers will face each other in the most dangerous game of chicken since the Cuban Missile Crisis. Ships will pass within 100 yards. Weapon systems will track targets. And one wrong move, one misinterpreted signal could ignite World War III. This is the story of America's most provocative military operation in decades. China's strategic response, and the hidden standoff that brought the world closer to war than anyone realizes. The South China Sea, 1.4 million square miles of water, home to some of the world's busiest shipping lanes, richest fishing grounds, and largest untapped oil reserves. And it's claimed by 6 different nations: China, Vietnam, Philippines, Malaysia, Brunei, Taiwan. Each claims overlapping portions of the sea based on historical grounds, international law, or geographic proximity. H-line, a vague boundary drawn on Chinese maps in 1947 that claims roughly 90% of the South China Sea as Chinese territory. It extends hundreds of miles from China's coast, deep into waters that international law designates as the exclusive economic zones of other nations. And here's the problem: China is enforcing this claim. Starting in 2013, China began an unprecedented military construction project. They took submerged reefs, barely visible at high tide, and transformed them into artificial islands. Not small islands, massive ones. Fiery Cross Reef, Mischief Reef, Subi Reef. Each now hosts a 10,000-foot runway, radar installations, surface-to-air missile batteries, hangars for fighter jets. China built 7 military bases out of sand and coral, and they did it in international waters. The United States calls it the Great Wall of Sand. China calls it sovereign territory. The implications are staggering. If China controls the South China Sea, they control $3.4 trillion in annual shipping trade, access routes to Japan, South Korea, and Taiwan, critical sea lanes connecting the Pacific and Indian Oceans, the strategic encirclement of American allies. This isn't just about islands. It's about the balance of power in the Indo-Pacific, and the United States has made its position clear. We don't recognize China's claims. We will sail wherever international law allows, and we will not be intimidated. That policy is called Freedom of Navigation Operations, FONOPs, and it's why American warships regularly sail through the South China Sea, deliberately crossing into waters China considers its own. China considers these operations provocations, acts of aggression, violations of sovereignty. The US considers them enforcement of international law. And so, every few months, an American carrier strike group enters the South China Sea. And every time, China responds. But in July 2020, something changed. China stopped just watching. They started waiting. Junho 2020 Indo-Pacific Command Headquarters, Hawaii. Admiral Phil Davidson, commander of all U.S. military forces in the Pacific, reviews intelligence reports. The situation in the South China Sea is escalating. China has just declared military exercises in the area live fire drills that close off vast sections of international waters. Vietnam has protested. The Philippines has filed a diplomatic complaint. Malaysia has scrambled fighter jets. But the real issue is what's happening on the ground, or rather, on the artificial islands. Satellite imagery confirms it. China has deployed HQ-29 surface-to-air missiles on Woody Island. DF-21 anti-ship ballistic missiles, nicknamed carrier killers, are positioned on the mainland, pointed toward the South China Sea. China is establishing an anti-access area, denial, A2AD, bubble, a zone where American forces can't operate without risking catastrophic losses. And if the US allows this to become the new normal, it's over. American credibility in the region collapses. Allies lose faith. China's dominance becomes fate. Admiral Davidson makes the call. Send the carriers, not one, two. The USS Nimitz and USS Ronald Reagan carrier. Strike Group's 11 ships, total, will conduct dual carrier operations in the South China Sea. A show of force. A message: we are not backing down. The orders are transmitted. The strike groups alter course. Destination: the heart of contested waters. The operation is publicly announced. The Pentagon releases a statement. U.S. Navy carrier strike groups are conducting maritime security operations and theater security cooperation efforts in the South China Sea. Translation: we're coming, and there's nothing you can do about it. But China has other ideas. July 3, 2020. People's Liberation Army, Navy Headquarters, Beijing. Chinese military planners receive word of the American operation to carrier strike groups, 11 warships, entering waters China considers sovereign. This is the largest American naval presence in the South China Sea in years, and Beijing interprets it as an escalation. The response is immediate. The planned People's Liberation Army Navy activates its South Sea Fleet. 16 warships are deployed, including 2 Type 55 Rianhai-class destroyers, China's most advanced surface combatants, equipped with 112 vertical launch cells, carrying anti-ship and anti-aircraft missiles. For Type 052D destroyers, D-discrivalent vessels with long-range radar and precision strike capability. 6 Type 05 for a frigate Santa submarine warfare specialists. Multiple Yuan-class submarines, diesel-electric boats, nearly silent, perfect for ambush. China also activates its rocket force. DF-21D and DF-26 anti-ship ballistic missiles are brought to launch readiness. These missiles have a range of 1,800 miles. They can hit a moving carrier from the Chinese mainland and the artificial islands. They're not just for show. H-26 bombers are deployed to Woody Island. Fighter jets to Subi Reef. Radar systems on Mischief Reef track every American vessel. China is creating a kill box, and the American carriers are sailing directly into it. But there's something else. Something the Pentagon doesn't expect. The Chinese fleet doesn't position itself defensively. It doesn't patrol Chinese claimed islands or form a protective screen. Instead, it moves to intercept. The planned warships sail to the exact coordinates where the American strike groups will enter contested waters, and they wait. Not as observers, as challengers. This isn't a cat-and-mouse game. It's a blockade. July 4, 2020, 0430 hours. The USS Nimitz crosses the threshold. The carrier's E to Hawkeye early warning aircraft detects them first. 16 contacts, surface vessels, bearing 180 degrees, range 50 nautical miles. On the Nimitz's bridge, The tactical action officer studies the radar plot. The Chinese ships are not maneuvering randomly. They're in formation, a line stretching 40 miles across the sea. At 0600 hours, the distance closes to 20 nautical miles. The American strike group can now see the Chinese ships on the horizon. Smokestacks, hulls, the silhouettes of destroyers. The bridge-to-bridge radio crackles. U.S. warship, this is Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy. You are entering Chinese territorial waters. Alter your course to avoid further action. The American response is immediate, professional, unwavering. Chinese warship, this is USS Nimitz. We are conducting lawful operations in international waters consistent with international law. We will maintain our course and speed. Silence. Then, at 0630 hours, the Chinese ships begin to move. But they're not moving away, they're moving closer. 6 Chinese destroyers break formation and accelerate toward the American strike group. Speed, 25 knots, closing rapidly. On the Nimitz, the Combat Information Center erupts in controlled urgency. 8 miles, 6 miles. Radar tracks update every second. Officers call out ranges. Chinese destroyers, bearing 090, range 10 miles and closing. Fighter jets are scrambled. FA-18 Super Hornets launch from the carrier deck. They form a combat air patrol overhead, a show of force and a warning. Below the surface, American submarines maneuver into attack positions. Their torpedoes are armed. Their sonar tracks Chinese subs doing the same. This is the moment. If someone fires, if a Chinese captain gets nervous, if an American radar operator misinterprets a signal, the shooting starts. And once it starts, it won't stop. The Chinese destroyers close to 3 miles, then 2 miles. Then, at 1.5 miles, they stop. The Chinese ships maintain formation. Engines idling. Guns trained on the American vessels, not firing, but not retreating. A standoff. For the next 72 hours, the American and Chinese fleets will shadow each other. Ships passing within 500 yards, helicopters circling, missiles locked. This is the new reality of great power competition. Not war, not peace, something in between. During the Cold War, the US and Soviet navies developed an agreement called INCSI Incidents at Sea. It established protocols to prevent accidental clashes. Ships must maintain safe distances. No simulated attacks. Clear communication on bridge-to-bridge radio. China and the US have a similar agreement. Code for unplanned encounters at CCUES. But agreements only work if both sides follow them. And in the South China Sea, China plays by its own rules. Over the next 3 days, the following incidents occur. July 5th, 0800 hours. A Chinese Type 052D destroyer crosses directly in front of the USS Nimitz, 400 yards ahead. The carrier must alter course to avoid collision. Under cues, this is illegal. China doesn't respond to American protests. July 5th, 1400 hours. Chinese fighter jets conduct mock attack runs on American E-2 Hawkeyes, unarmed surveillance aircraft. The jets come within 100 feet. Their radar locks on. Again, a violation. Again, no response. July 6th, 0600 hours. An American destroyer, USS Mustin, detects a Chinese submarine surfacing 2,000 yards off its bow. The submarine sits on the surface for 10 minutes. A message: "We're here, we're tracking you." July 6th, 1900 hours. The most dangerous moment. A Chinese destroyer, the the Longzhou maneuvers aggressively toward the USS Ronald Reagan. The two ships pass port to port at a distance of just 150 yards. For context, 150 yards is the length of 1.5 football fields. At sea, between 10,000-ton warships traveling at speed, that's a near collision. One miscalculation, one wave, one steering error, and they collide. A collision between American and Chinese warships, with crews killed, would be an act of war. Or at least, it could be framed that way. And both sides know it. So why does China do this? Why risk catastrophe? Because it works. China's strategy in the South China Sea is called gray zone warfare. It's conflict below the threshold of war. Aggressive, but not openly hostile. Provocative, but not justifying military retaliation. The goal is simple: make American operations so dangerous, so costly, so risky, that eventually the US stops coming. If China can force American carriers to avoid the South China Sea without firing a shot, they win. And it's working slowly. After the July 2020 standoff, the Pentagon conducts an internal review. The risks are assessed, the costs calculated. Operating in the South China Sea now requires constant combat air patrols, burning through flight hours and pilot fatigue, submarine escorts, stretching already thin submarine forces, enhanced readiness, meaning less time for maintenance and training, the ever-present risk of an incident spiraling into armed conflict. Is it worth it to sail through contested waters just to prove a point? Some Pentagon officials argue no. Pull back. Focus on less contested areas. Let China have its sphere of influence. But others argue the opposite. Retreat now, and you lose everything. American credibility collapses. Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Philippines, they all question whether the US will defend them if China moves on Taiwan. This is the Thucydides trap. The ancient Greek historian Thucydides wrote about the Peloponnesian War: a rising power, Athens challenging an established power, Sparta. The result, inevitable war. Today, China is the rising power. America is the established power. And the South China Sea is the arena where this contest will be decided. July 7th, 2020. After 72 hours, the American carrier strike groups complete their transit. They exit the South China Sea and continue operations in the Western Pacific. The Chinese fleet shadows them the entire way. And as the American ships cross into international waters beyond China's claimed zone, the Chinese warships stop. They don't pursue. Mission complete for both sides. The US proved it can operate freely in international waters. China proved it will contest every passage. Both sides avoided war. Both sides claimed victory. But the question remains, how long can this continue? How many near collisions before there's an actual collision? How many lock-ons before someone fires? And what happens when China decides that shadowing isn't enough? The July 2020 standoff wasn't an anomaly. It's become routine. Since then, US carrier groups have transited the South China Sea dozens of times. And every time, China responds with more ships, more aircraft, more aggression. In 2021, a Chinese warship aimed a military-grade laser at a US P-8 Poseidon surveillance aircraft, temporarily blinding the crew. In 2022, a Chinese fighter jet flew within 20 feet of an American reconnaissance plane. So close the Chinese pilot could be seen in the cockpit. The Pentagon calls these unsafe and unprofessional intercepts. China calls them defensive actions against American provocations. But the reality is more complex. Both nations are locked in a strategic competition neither can afford to lose. For China, the The South China Sea is existential. It's the gateway to the Pacific. It's their buffer zone against American encirclement. And it's proof that China is no longer a regional power. It's a global one. For the United States, freedom of navigation in the South China Sea is a principle worth defending. Because if America backs down here, where else will it back down? Taiwan, the East China Sea, the Indian Ocean, allies are watching. Japan has increased its military spending. Australia is building nuclear submarines. The Philippines is reopening US military bases closed decades ago. Everyone is choosing sides, and the stakes are getting higher. There's a concept in international relations called crisis stability. It's the idea that during a standoff, both sides have incentives to avoid escalation. But the South China Sea is becoming less stable, not more. Here's why. Both the US and China are deploying more advanced, more lethal weapons, hypersonic missiles, autonomous drones, AI-guided targeting systems. These technologies reduce decision time. In a crisis, commanders have seconds, not minutes, to decide whether to fire. And that's dangerous. Because in war, speed kills. But in peacetime, speed causes accidents. Imagine this scenario. A Chinese submarine surfaces near an American destroyer. The destroyer's sonar mistakenly interprets it as an attack profile. Automated systems recommend launching torpedoes. The captain has 10 seconds to decide. Does he trust the computer? Does he wait and risk being hit first? Does he fire and potentially start World War III? This isn't hypothetical. Near misses have already happened. And every time, both sides get lucky. Someone hesitates. Someone shows restraint. But luck runs out. Eventually. The question isn't whether there will be another incident in the South China Sea. The question is whether the next incident can be contained. History doesn't repeat, but it rhymes. In 1914, the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand sparked World War I, not because anyone wanted a world war, but because alliances, mobilization schedules, and miscommunication turned a regional crisis into a global catastrophe. Today, the South China Sea has all the ingredients for a similar miscalculation. To superpowers, contested territory, national pride, military forces in close proximity. And the terrifying reality is this: neither side can back down. China cannot abandon its claims in the South China Sea without losing face domestically and strategically. The Chinese Communist Party has staked its legitimacy on restoring China's historical greatness. Retreat is not an option. The United States cannot abandon freedom of navigation without undermining its alliances and credibility. If America stops patrolling the South China Sea, its entire Indo-Pacific strategy collapses. So the patrols continue. The carrier groups enter contested waters. Chinese warships form up and wait. Fighter jets buzz each other. Ships pass dangerously close. And every time, both sides hope prayed that no one makes a mistake. Because the cost of a mistake is unthinkable. This is the story of what happens when two superpowers refuse to blink. When national interest collides with international law. When pride and power leave no room for compromise. The US carrier group entered the South China Sea. China's warships were already waiting. And one day, maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but one day someone will make a move that can't be taken back. A conflict between the United States and China wouldn't be a limited skirmish. It would be catastrophic. Both nations have nuclear weapons. Both have global interests. Both have allies who would be dragged into the fight. The South China Sea standoff is the most dangerous game being played on Earth right now. And it's happening in silence. No headlines, no public outrage, just ships in the night, watching each other. This is the new Cold War, and the South China Sea is its most dangerous battlefield.